Hey, come see us on tour. We're going to be in Los Angeles, Columbus, Ohio, Dayton, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Lexington, Kentucky, Burbank, California, and Honolulu. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. The New York Times is even coming out and acknowledging the huge failure of DEI programs. Now, the ultimate irony was that when Donald Trump went to the National Association of Black Journalists to have an interview with them, they were angry at him because he said that Kamala Harris was a DEI hire. And what he should have said back to them was, I thought you guys liked DEI. Are you now insulting women who are hired because of DEI? Because that sounds like he should have said that. He should have said, what's wrong with DEI hires? Are you saying that they're not qualified? What are you saying? So he should have turned it back around on him, but he doesn't have the best advisors. Anyway, here in the New York Times Magazine, it says the University of Michigan doubled down on DEI. What went wrong? So, by the way, isn't Bill Gates putting microaggression in all of his products? Well, people are certainly acting that way lately. Anyway, leaders of the University of Michigan, one of America's most prestigious public universities, like to say that their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion is inseparable from the pursuit of academic excellence. Most students must take at least one class addressing, quote, racial and ethnic intolerance and resulting inequality. Doctoral students in educational studies must take an equity lab and a racial justice seminar. Computer science students are quizzed on microaggressions. Programs across the university are couched in the distinctive jargon that, to DEI's practitioners, reflects proven practices for making classrooms more inclusive, and to its critics reveals how deeply DEI is encoded with left-wing ideologies. Remember, this is in New York Times Magazine. Michigan's largest division trains professors in anti-racist pedagogy and dispenses handouts on identifying and addressing characteristics of white supremacy culture like worship of the written word. Holy effing. So that's a characteristic of white supremacy culture is worship of the written word. Tell that to Chris Hedges. Okay. Anyway, the English department has adopted a 245-word land acknowledgement describing its core subject as, quote, a language brought by colonizers to North America. Even Michigan's business school, according to its DEI webpage, is committed to fighting all forms of oppression. Huh. So does that mean that Michigan Business School is going to go to war with itself? Anyway, a decade ago, Michigan's leaders set in motion an ambitious new DEI plan, aiming to, quote, enact far-reaching foundational change at every level in every unit. Striving to touch every individual on campus, as the school puts it, Michigan has poured roughly $250 million into DEI since 2016, according to an internal presentation they obtained. In 2021, a 2021 report from the Conservative Heritage Foundation examining the growth of DEI programs across higher education, the only such study that currently exists, found Michigan to have by far the largest DEI bureaucracy of any large public university. Tens of thousands of undergraduates have completed bias training. Thousands of instructors have been trained in inclusive teaching. Wow. Okay. Okay. When Michigan inaugurated what it now calls DEI 1.0, it intentionally placed itself in the vanguard of a revolution, then reshaping American higher education. Around the country, college administrators were rapidly expanding DEI, convinced that such programs would help attract and retain a more diverse array of students and faculty. Today, the revolution is under withering attack. Energized by backlash to Black Lives Matter movement and the right-wing campaign against critical race theory in public institutions, at least a dozen states have banned or limited DEI programs at public universities. After the October 7th attacks at campuses across the country erupted with protests against Israel, critics accused DEI programs of fostering anti-Semitism. Wow. In the fever of the 2024 campaign, Republican influencers and politicians have recast DEI as an all-purpose boogeyman, the root cause of defective airplanes, the collapse of Baltimore Bridge, and the near assassination of Donald Trump. But even some of Michigan's peer institutions have soured on aspects of DEI. Last spring, both the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Harvard's Faculty of Arts and Sciences said they would no longer require job candidates to submit diversity statements. Such compelled statements, MIT's president said, impinge on freedom of expression. Michigan hasn't joined the retreat. Instead, it's redoubled its efforts, testing the future of an embattled ideal. A year ago, the university inaugurated what it calls DEI 2.0 at Michigan's flagship Ann Arbor campus. The number of employees who work in DEI-related offices or have diversity, equity, and inclusion in their job titles increased by 70%. Reaching 241. When school began in August, brightly colored flags around campus promoted the goals of DEI 2.0. According to a confidential report I obtained, a committee appointed by Michigan's provost and stocked with professors with DEI-related appointments urged the school this summer to continue using diversity statements in hiring and promotion, arguing that eliminating them would be seen as a capitulation to the winds of political expediency. In many respects, Michigan's entire DEI initiative can be understood as a sustained act of defiance against such pressures. When the Supreme Court outlawed affirmative action across the land last year, stripping selective colleges of their most powerful tool for building racially diverse classes, Michigan's president, Santa J. Ono, went on PBS's NewsHour to offer his university as the model for achieving diversity in a post-affirmative action world. Over months of reporting this year, I found a different kind of backlash building. One that emanated not from Washington or right-wing think tanks, but from inside the university's own dorms and faculty. The calls coming from inside the house. On Michigan's largely left-leaning campus, few of the people I met questioned the broad ideals of diversity or social justice. Yet the most common attitude I encountered about DEI during my visits to Ann Arbor was kind of a wary disdain. DEI at Michigan is rooted in a struggle for racial integration that began more than a half century ago, but many black students today regard the school's expansive program as a well-meaning failure. The university now has a greater proportion of Hispanic, Asian, and first-generation students and a more racially diverse staff. Princess J. Maria Mubap, the speaker of the university's Black Student Union, told me that the students are most affected by DEI, meaning marginalized communities, are invested in the work, not in DEI itself. Maboob called Michigan's efforts superficial. For all their spread and reach, she told me the school's DEI programs betrayed a general discomfort with naming blackness explicitly. Her discontent reflected a tension I found threaded throughout DEI at Michigan, a pervasive uncertainty around whom and what DEI is really for. Like most schools, Michigan officially celebrates diversity of every kind and inclusion for all. The school's own definition of DEI, which cites 13 distinct kinds of identity, is as sprawling as the university itself. On campus, I met students with a wide range of backgrounds and perspectives. Not one expressed any particular enthusiasm for Michigan's DEI initiative. Where some found it shallow, others found it stifling. They rolled their eyes at the profusion of course offerings that revolved around identity and oppression, the DEI-themed emails they frequently received but barely read. So that's just one example of the people that their DEI is meant to help and prop up are being disgusted by it. And I love that what that term was, a wary, let me find it. A wary disdain.
Yeah.
Even in Ann Arbor. So go ahead, Go ahead, Christian. Go ahead and comment on this article.
It makes perfect sense, because at one level it's just the natural reaction to bureaucracy and the colonizing effect of bureaucracy. I mean, bureaucrats, particularly within universities, are constantly trying to justify their existence, and students and faculty feel that because they're constantly intervening in and essentially drawing resources away from the fundamental relationship between student and faculty in the classroom. So that doesn't surprise me at all. I should say at John Jay College, which is part of CUNY, the City University of New York, we have the economics program. We have a master's degree, and we're among the top MA programs in terms of people of color and women entering PhD programs for economics, which is a very male and white and Asian dominated discipline. And we don't teach to this stuff. We teach heterodox, history-oriented kind of political economy, and so the proof is in the pudding. That's what, our school is a working class school, commuter school. Majority of the students are Latino, but we have students from everywhere in the world there because it's part of the New York City school system. I think that really shows like what if you're really committed to diversity, you don't go in for this stuff. It's like you speak to economic reality and give people material opportunities, such as the school, the system that is CUNY, the City University of New York. We have the lowest student debt in the country. Anyway, just got to get my plug in there since we're talking about universities. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say to it. It's just, it's a cancer that is really serious, and it has this material basis. And I don't know how easy it will be to get rid of, because you're talking about this entire class of bureaucrats. Max Weber, one of the founding fathers of sociology, talks about this, right? That the problem with bureaucracy, he was actually himself a bureaucrat at times, and he saw that bureaucracy was important. But the danger with bureaucracy is that it produces this class, the officialdom, that tries to reproduce its material basis, which is just an expansion of the bureaucracy, often at the expense of the mission itself. So we see some of this at work here, that underneath all this is something that's not dealt with in the Times article. I mean, part of what's going on here is a bunch of bureaucrats who get a lot of money and aren't producing anything of value to anyone except themselves. Right. And so they have to work very hard, and they have to be very ingenious about how they justify this bullshit racket of theirs.
And it is a racket. When most of the people describe it as shallow and stifling, which to me sounds like a review for Piers Morgan's show. So you know what else I found out? I don't know. Maybe I found this out from you, but I think I did actually. A lot of this DEI stuff that corporations employ, like when they get that D'Angelo woman to come give a lecture at their corporation, and what they're actually doing is they're trying to insulate themselves from lawsuits because of a failure of the civil rights legislation and on the 60s, right? Yeah. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the material drivers of woke culture, I mean, we were talking in the previous segment about sort of the political agenda of divide et impera, divide and rule, right? But there's also, coming out of the civil rights legislation, Civil Rights Act, some sort of inadequacies that have engendered in corporate America this process of investing heavily in this stuff. So what it is that a lot of the enforcement under the Civil Rights Act was left to the civil courts. And it's up to people who feel that they have been discriminated against to sue in civil court, as opposed to the government policing all of this. The counterexample to this would be France, where there's not as much of this DEI type policy in place. However, what is in place is governed by the Ministry of Labor. then they also have some quotas. For example, they have specific quotas about the number of women in certain representations of like local and regional government. They've got quotas about the number of disabled people that firms have to hire. And so if firms don't do that, the Ministry of Labor comes in and checks the books and then just makes them do it, right? In this country, while there is some enforcement from the federal government, a lot of the enforcement is left up to individuals. So this has given rise to
lawsuits,
a class of lawyers who sue on behalf of aggrieved parties. And then in response, corporations have to build defenses. And there have been some very powerful victories for people who have been genuinely discriminated against. And corporations have basically like 95% of the Fortune 500 companies have had to pay multi-billion-dollar settlements for discrimination. Sometimes we're talking 100, 170, 200 and change $million by major corporations like Pepsi-Cola, this sort of stuff, right? So in response to that kind of a hit, what corporations do is hire people like Robin DiAngelo, who is herself now a multimillionaire, according to most reports, to come in and do what they do, which is re-educate people, this and that. Now, when a corporation does this, hopefully Robin DiAngelo gets knucklehead, a-hole, racists, and sexists to shut their mouths and not alienate their coworkers with disgusting, bigoted comments. But if that doesn't work, at least you can show that you have made an investment, right? And so if someone comes with a real or frivolous suit, you can say, look, this is just this manager. This is not our corporate culture. We've had Robin DiAngelo. We have had Ibram X. Kendi. We have had the top firms come in every year. We do this and that. We have a budget of X amount. This company is committed, and we can show you the receipts. We are committed to fairness, right? So that is a huge part of what drives us. There's a constant flow of resources into this entrepreneurial strata of DEI hustlers like Ibram X. Kendi and Robin DiAngelo. And for some reason in America, going back to Truman, the idea was there can never be quotas. And as I said earlier, maybe there should be hiring quotas. Maybe we should have that discussion. But because that's the thing, you cannot have quotas, that there's a vagueness in all of this. And then because the Civil Rights Act left a lot of the enforcement to the civil legal system in which people sue each other, corporations sue each other, people sue corporations, rather than government regulation, we get this kind of unintended evolution of corporate investment in the promulgation of this very sick subculture.
So that was very eye-opening to me, that a lot of the corporations, I didn't know that 95% of the Fortune 500 companies have been sued, and for these kind of civil lawsuits, they've lost billions of dollars. And so to insulate themselves from those kind of lawsuits of discrimination, they do all this kind of stuff. They have DEI, and to kind of insulate themselves from this kind of, a payout that they're going to have to give to a lawsuit. Hey, come see us on tour. We're going to be in Los Angeles, Columbus, Ohio, Dayton, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Lexington, Kentucky, Burbank, California, and Honolulu. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.